We all have a unique view of the world we are in, how you overcome your challenges or attain your goals. Every experience in life has the potential to inspire, influence, and impact those around us. Welcome to the 3i Stories podcast by Better Version of You. Hello, friends, and welcome to the next episode of the 3i Stories podcast by Better Version of You. I'm Pritesh, your host, and I have the wonderful privilege of bringing you another incredible guest. Someone from Fiji, someone who has lived majority of her life here, but has done a lot of work for the people of Fiji. Someone who is a research fellow for the Heart Foundation of New Zealand. She's a mother, she has a husband, and an incredible leader, a community leader as well. Let's welcome our guest, Dr. Pritika Narayan. Pritika, how are you doing today?
Namaskaram, Pritesh. Thank you so much for this opportunity. It's really lovely to be speaking with you. And today it's a little bit warmer in Wellington, and it's going well. Thank you.
Right, I'm glad it's getting warmer because it has been freezing in New Zealand for the last few days.
Yeah, it
Pritika,
really has.
thank you for your time. Thank you for being here. We are so excited to hear your journey, but also the incredible work that you are doing, especially for the people of Fiji. Pritika, could you tell us a little bit about life growing up? I mean, how did it all start?
Yeah, so I was born in Fiji. My parents are both from Kuruvutuba and Ngururikiriki, and they had a love marriage, and I think being the product of a love marriage means that our parents take a lot more risks. And so they took a really big risk in moving to New Zealand. Dad came here to work in 86, and we actually were visiting him in 87 when the coup happened. And so we never went back. And that's really how our journey in New Zealand started. And, being a child of immigrant parents, I suppose our parents either want us to be engineers, doctors, or lawyers, right? And they really wanted me to be a doctor. Unfortunately, I couldn't really handle the sight of blood, so I really didn't want to be a doctor. But I really loved science, and I was fascinated, like right from, my first sort of uni, fascinated by DNA and by genetics. And really that captivated my heart and has been something that I've been fascinated about since and have wanted to understand how it works. How is it the blueprint of life? How is it, how does it break down? How can you repair it? All of those things. And really that's informed a lot of the trajectory of what I've done in my career.
Okay, we will definitely touch your education and your career, but I just want to say that makes the two of us that doesn't like the sight of blood, right? I have a little cut on my finger, and if I look at it, I can pass out.
I have grown a bit more brave having children though, because they're
Right.
always injuring themselves and breaking things. So yeah, I have definitely gotten better at that.
Brilliant. Pritika, talking about your education, and I addressed you as Dr. Pritika Narayan. Can you tell us a little bit about your education in your background into what you're doing now?
Yeah, sure. So I did my university degree at Victoria University of Wellington. And so this is where I studied human genetics and what we call molecular pathology. So I, by training, am a molecular biologist. So I didn't do a medical degree. I did a biomedical science research degree. And what I learned very quickly in this process is that you can't get a job without having experience, and you can't get experience without having a job. So I had very early on approached one of my favorite lecturers and, realized that sometimes opportunities aren't going to present themselves to you. You have to make them. And so by approaching my lecturer, I asked her if I could just do some volunteer research in her lab during summer, and she let me. And that actually gave me the experience I needed to put my CV out from the pile, and And that really opened, again, a trajectory for being able to get the next job. And I also realized that I just really loved research, and I had a very curious mind, and I wanted to understand how things work and what happens when they break down, particularly in our cells and in our DNA.
You are talking about having a passion and an interest for science, right?
Yeah, and I mean, I haven't touched on the fact that I also then went on to do a master's and a PhD, and for that I moved to Auckland. So I started working at the University of Auckland as a research technician after my degree, and my supervisor at the time really liked the work that I was doing, and so he encouraged me to do a master's and then a PhD. And I never thought that I would have a career as a researcher in science, leading research programs. I just really loved what I did. But during this time, and I imagine you're going to ask me some more questions about it, but during this time, I had two brother-in-laws who died of heart attacks, very young, and that had a very profound impact on me, because at the time I was studying the genetics of neurodegenerative diseases like Huntington's disease and Alzheimer's disease. And Huntington's disease in particular is a disease that's caused by a genetic mutation or a specific genetic code. If you have the gene, you have the disease. If you don't have the gene, you don't have the disease. And so this pattern was what we were seeing in these other families where these young men had died. You always see this pattern of either it's a grandparent and a parent and a child that's affected, or several aunties and uncles affected in the family. That is often a genetic trait. It's not just because of lifestyle or diet. It's a genetic driver that causes that disease. And then to sort of realize that nobody had studied this in our community. So that's really the curiosity, as well as the fascination of genetics, as well as these opportunities that opened up, whether of themselves or because I really intentionally tried to open them up myself, have led me to where I am. Yeah.
Wow. Pritika, you use the word genetics. And if some of our audience who don't understand what is genetics in what you are talking about, could you try and explain to us in simple words?
So bear with me. In terms of traits, right? When we talk about in our own families, like hamaila kandani nake. And this nose is the nose that my dad has, and it's the nose that my aji had. And we all can see certain patterns in our families that, we've inherited that from our elders.
Right.
That is a genetic trait that has been passed down through the generations, right? And it's linked to a specific digit or handful of digits in your DNA code. And every person in the world has a 3 billion digit code, a unique 3 billion digit code that makes up their genome, their genetics, all of their DNA. And that DNA is in every single cell of our body, and the things that are expressed from that DNA become essentially the building blocks of every single cell in our body, and what everything happens in our body is all dictated by and large by our genetics.
So in other words, what you're saying, Pritika, is you got very interested in how our body is made up and what actually makes our body to the cell level.
And particularly when a disease happens, what is it that's going wrong and how can we fix it? And that's probably where I want to spend the rest of my life. Yeah.
Right. So we will talk about your specific study and the disease that you are trying to research for the people of Fiji to help them. But before we go into that, Pritika, you said you were interested in science. Was there anything growing up that made you, have that passion or that interest for science?
So if you're asking who my biggest inspiration would be in this, it was my aji. And I know she's like for everyone who knows me and my family, they would say, but Aji never went to university or Aji never learned how to read or write. But when I spent time with Aji, and she would come every summer almost to visit us in New Zealand, and she would
Right.
spend the summer with me, and I would spend all my hours with her pretty much. And I would watch her make things with her hands, and she would experiment with different flavors. Like I remember her making avocado chutney, something that nobody would have thought to make,
Nice.
but
Yeah.
Aji thought to make that. And she would experiment with all these different flavors, and it was always delicious. And she did it with her hands, and she applied like creativity to it, and it was beautiful. And she would explain it as she went, and all of these things I loved about her. Yeah.
So Aji had a big part
Yeah.
in shaping who you are today in what you are doing. Thank you, Pritika. Pritika, looking at my notes here, I see that you were so brave that you had delivered your baby at home. Now, can you tell us a little bit about how was that experience, firstly, and two, if that experience actually led you to be what you are doing today?
It was my second baby. So the first one, thank goodness, was in hospital, but the second one decided to come very, very quickly. And so it was an unplanned home birth, and she arrived in 28 minutes. It was the first time actually that I experienced my Aji after she had died. I felt her in the room. And it was one of those moments where everything else stands still, and you focus your energy and all of your attention on one thing. And all I could focus my energy on was Aji saying to me, Goody, you can do this, because I did this 12 times on the floor of my mud hut.
Wow.
And then when I breastfed my daughter for the first time, then Aji's stories just flooded back to me. And the one that was the loudest, that I could not let go of, was the one where she would breastfeed babies whose mothers had died during childbirth.
Wow.
And Aji was born at the turn of, like, when the indenture was ending, so in 1920. So by this time, the indenture, we would understand is wrapping up, and people are free. But just because the indenture finished didn't mean that the hardship finished. Actually, those families still had to work to sustain themselves, and there was still a very exploitative indenture system still in place. And what that question was why were the women dying, right? Why were these women dying during childbirth? And so it actually sent me on this trajectory. So when my daughter was just 3 weeks old, my dad would come and look after her, and I would go to the National Library to read through the indenture death records to figure out what was the reason for the woman dying. And I read through 17,000 death records.
Wow.
And I realized that more than half of those deaths were of children under the age of 10. More than half of those were under the age of 1. And we know from other studies of famines around the world is that when there is a context of famine, children are the first to die. And that was actually the context of Fiji, is there was so little food in the rations during the indenture that so many people were dying. And what I also read were some of the letters that were exchanged between the governors at the time. And it documented that this was an experiment, a social experiment on how little food could be given to people for the maximum work output. And this had a huge impact on me. I mean, aside from the anger and the disgust at the system, just the horrific nature of this indenture really set in when you think about the children that were dying and the women that were dying during childbirth, because any blood loss during childbirth was life-threatening, was fatal. And then you think about how history has been told. It's often been told not through the mouths of the women. These women would have been either lactating, menstruating, or childbearing at any one point. Like my Aji gotten married from a very young age, 13 years or so, and would have gone on to have 12 children, she would have been either lactating, menstruating, or childbearing at any one point during those many years of carrying children. And she was one of the lucky ones who survived. Many, many women didn't, and so hence why she was breastfeeding those other babies whose mothers had died. And what I then realized, it was like this, sometimes a penny drops. It's like this moment of epiphany where you realize, my God, how could I have not seen this before? And for me, that was the moment where I realized, my goodness, what if our ancestors who were fortunate enough to survived because they had some genetic advantage to survive? What if these people were able to store fat in regions around their body as soon as they ate food, in unusual spaces around their body, so that when they were starving, they could draw on that resource to survive for energy? And that same trait is now maladaptive or working against us because we live in a context of relative dietary abundance. And, is it that same trait that is now causing these heart attacks, these very premature heart attacks? And, and the really striking thing about these heart attacks is it's not only the family inheritance pattern, it's often in young people who aren't smokers, they aren't obese, they don't have diabetes. These are extremely unlikely recipients of a heart attack, and yet they have these often fatal first heart attacks when they're very young. And that's what we're trying to understand is, actually, was this something that was protective and helped our ancestors to survive, but is that same trait is now maladaptive and causing these devastating heart attacks? So many of the children in our community, so many within my own family, have grown up without a father figure because of these heart attacks. And I think there's so much to be done to turn that around.
Wow, that's incredible work you are doing, but to focus on your actual work now, Pritika. So you are a research fellow for the Heart Foundation of New Zealand, and you are leading a study for the people of Fiji, and your study is around heart attack, right? Could you tell us a little bit, because you've mentioned some very important points here, for the majority of the Fiji Indians, if not all, our ancestors came out of the Gurmit period, right? And you are saying that the lifestyle they had, the horrific conditions they had to go through and grow through, is now affecting who we are in this modern age, being the descendants of them. Is that true?
Yeah. So to summarize what you've said, this, I think, is absolutely an impact of colonization on our people and has lasting health effects now, even today. Yes, is the answer to that. And what are we doing now? So the Fiji Heart Study is the first ever genetic study of premature coronary artery disease or premature heart attacks amongst peoples of Fiji. And so really we're focused on trying to understand what is the pattern of heart disease within our family. So one of the first things I do with my participants is we meet, we chat, and we try and map out how many people in the family have had a heart disease related event. And we draw a family tree so that they can see the pattern for themselves. And then we ask them to give a sample of their blood, and that blood is used to extract DNA. Often I still try not to look at the blood directly. But yeah, we use that to extract the DNA, and this DNA we then analyze with this sort of cutting edge technique called whole genome sequencing. So as I mentioned before, the DNA in our bodies is in every single cell, and every single cell has that same 3 billion digits of DNA, of that code. And what we are looking for is the code that is in common between all of our severe heart disease cases is it a common code that is causing that heart disease early in them? Because once we find that code, then we can diagnose it early, years before a heart attack even, the disease sets in.
Right.
And not only can we target it early, we can then intervene early. So we can, make those people aware that they have this heightened risk, get them onto preventative treatments, but also design treatments that are tailored for us. So one of the things, again, I love about my Aji is whenever she had to take any medicine, she was always very suspicious of it because she's like, "Hami gora la dawai nahi khao." She always used to say that this was not designed for me. Now you just think about that. How did she know that? And she would have observed many people reacting having adverse reactions to medication that they'd taken, knowing that it was a white man's medication, not a medication that was designed for them. And the sad reality of our world today is that even though, people who are of European ancestry form only 16% of the world's population, almost all of our research and our studies and drugs that are developed are optimized in these European populations. So this is the first study for peoples of Fiji, a genetic study for cardiovascular disease that's ever been conducted for peoples of Fiji. And that is so important because if we don't understand our genetic makeup, we will never be able to have equity in precision medicine or in medicines that are designed based on people's genetic makeup. And that's happening all the time now. And so that's really the importance of the study.
Wow.
Yeah.
Pritika, do I hear, and please correct me, that because we are the descendants, that we all possibly is the word, so I don't want to scare our viewers, possibly have this DNA, this genome that could potentially put us at a risk of having a heart attack? That's one. And two, are you saying that the medication that we are administered is not based on the actual makeup of our blood or the ethnicity tailored? Is that what you're saying?
That's a really complicated question.
Okay.
I think there's no simple answer there.
Right.
So if you think about any drugs that go into the market, who are they optimized in? Predominantly, the people in those clinical trials are European. Yes, 85% of people in clinical trials are European. Yet, people of European ancestry only form 16% of the world's population. Okay?
Right.
So there is an inequity. There's a disproportionate or inequitable representation of people of color in those studies. In terms of genetics, all of us are related in some way or the other. We're all human, right? The genes that largely work in our bodies are universal. But there are little nicks or little changes between each one of us that makes each one of us unique. And sometimes those changes are really advantageous and sometimes they're not. So for example, sometimes a little change may cause, like our nose not to function properly. Let's go with that example. But another little change may make it function even better, right? Within the same family, right? Maybe my nose is flatter than my sister's, and so her nose looks more beautiful. Great example, right? But that's sort of how it works, right? Like just because we have this in our families doesn't mean that every single person is going to get it as well.
Right.
But it does mean that there is a increased risk of it. The beauty of studying it in our population, though, is that the idea behind it is that we come from a very specific region in India, right? These regions had already undergone 100 years of famine under British rule. these people were selected or cherry-picked from these regions to come to Fiji and to other indentured plantations all around the world, right? And each of these groups go to, I think it's like 18 different colonies, more than 18 different colonies around the world. Fiji is the last one. Fiji is the most isolated one. Fiji is the one where there is absolutely no intermixing between the groups, right? So Itoke do not generally intermix with the Indo-Fijian population. So we remain very isolated. What happens in that situation is our gene pool does not diversify, right? So where all the other, people living in India, there's huge diversity, even within villages, there's huge diversity. The diversity that we started with remains that diversity in Fiji, in the Indo-Fijian population, right? So what happens there is the chance of inheriting these risky genes is increased in our population because we just didn't diversify. It's like if you compare the population in India to a haystack, right? It's a humongous haystack, whereas the population in Fiji is tiny. So when we're looking for that needle in the haystack, our chances of finding that needle is much higher in Fiji. It will still have direct relevance to all of those populations around the world. So the beauty of finding something in our population is immense. The impact that it can have is immense. But it's also a double-edged sword, right? As in, it was protective for our ancestors, but it's now maladaptive. It's not serving its purpose anymore because we live in these contexts of such different diets, of these incredible, what we call nutrition transitions, right? Like when you think about the diet of our ancestors, you think about what Aji and her parents would have eaten. They ate largely boiled food. They didn't eat roti like we do as much, like roti was introduced much later when flour came in. Their diet was dal and rice. That was all that was in the ration. For 100 years prior as well, in those regions that we come from, it was dal and rice predominantly. So how has our diet changed so much that we eat so much, roti? So many of us have intolerance to gluten, for example. We eat so much in terms of fried foods, in terms of additives, in terms of you just imagine when Aji lived where she lived, they would have grown all of their fruits and vegetables organically. No pesticides, no herbicides. What is the situation now? Our chicken, the chicken that she would have eaten would have been organic. Now it's pumped with hormones, right? There's so many differences in how we eat and consume now compared to what they were wired for and how they ate and consumed. They had a much simpler diet. They put a lot less into their bodies and they lived longer relatively, because they worked really hard as well.
Right. So for someone who doesn't understand science that much, right? Because I'm a technology background person.
Cool.
So you're saying that because we have got that DNA, that make of our body was shaped from our ancestors, to now the food we eat and the food they ate, the makeup of the body and our eating habits, there's a bit of a conflict now. Is that what you're saying in short?
Yeah, I'm sort of a little bit nervous to put it like this, but I think we are wired for fewer calories.
Right.
We really are. And I think that would solve a lot of our problems by and large if we ate fewer calories.
Okay. Sounds like we have to eat dal bhat, right?
Well, I love dal bhat and so do my children. And I think, I could easily survive on that if that was the only food that I had. I'm not saying that we shouldn't eat a diverse, range of food.
Yeah.
But think about how our ancestors ate. They ate a lot of fresh fruit. They ate a lot of uncooked vegetables because they had to, right? They didn't have something to fry up quickly often. That came much later when they had access to oil. They Yeah, so there's been major changes in our diet that I think we forget to really give it its due process and due diligence in terms of thinking about how different our lives are and how our eating habits and lifestyle is so different. And I think there's some gems and beauty in revisiting how Ajit and people like her in that generation did it, you know?
That's beautiful. I think everyone growing in Fiji who had seen our parents, our grandparents have a garden patch in our backyard have kind of evolved and done a little bit of gardening here, but I think it's diminishing, and I think it's more growing our own fruit and veggies and keeping things as organic as possible, is what you're saying. I wouldn't want to panic any of our Fiji Indian listeners or viewers. Look, we are how we are, right? It's not that, you are at a risk of getting a heart attack. You need to do something right away. No, it's not what this conversation is about. This conversation is about we may possibly have something that could be causing our friends and family to have these diseases, and specifically heart diseases, early. And that is what the research that is headed by Pritika is trying to find out. Right, she is and her team are trying to find out the specific makeup of our body, and I'm trying to use non-science language. We're not trying to scare people, but we are trying to say, hey, look, there's no harm in getting yourselves checked up. And like you said, if something does show up in the results, we've kind of, from our action, found out something that you didn't know, and that we can start to remedy, right? To start fixing. Pritika, you are doing an incredible work in this space, and it is so needed. So thank you for stepping up and being the first one from Fiji to lead this type of study. And, I see the relevance of it. I see why this is needed, because you are right. There's a large percentage of Fiji Indians who unfortunately are passing away or are managing heart-related disease. Right. So thank you for that. And this study is still in progress. It hasn't finished yet. To our listeners, what can they do to help you? Or what would you be asking them? How can they be part of this?
If you know somebody affected by heart disease, please tell them about our study. They can contact me. I'm sure Pritesh can put my details
Yes.
online, but also we have a website. It's www.fijiheartstudy.com, and you can sign up for the study there if you're interested, if you meet the eligibility criteria. We're looking for people who've had a heart attack under 50 years of age, or have been diagnosed with severe heart disease before then. Most of our participants are actually under 40 years of age, and they have a striking pattern of heart disease within their families. So I suppose that gives you some indication of the types of people we're looking for. The other really interesting thing about doing this study, though, is that you then start seeing patterns within the pattern, right? So often in our families, we see that there's these young men with this clinically overt coronary artery disease, overt heart attack, right? Very young. And then you see within that family, either it's their siblings or maybe their aunties who are directly biologically related to them, who complain like around their menopause age or maybe after they've had gestational diabetes, they complain of angina. And these women maybe might go to hospital, but they leave without a diagnosis because the heart disease looks very different in the woman compared to the men. It's still heart disease, and it's still potentially, a concern, and can be dealt with relatively easily if it's diagnosed early. But if it goes undiagnosed, that's where the problems begin. And so again, if you fit that description, please get in touch with us, because we'd really love to include as many women as possible in our studies as we can. Yeah.
Now, brilliant. We'll definitely have the website on screen for people to contact you, and if they can be part of the study. Pritika, what you're doing is intense, right? How do you keep yourself, holistically okay and fit to be doing all this? And my second question related to it is what is your drive? Like what makes you continue to do something like this, which is quite intense?
Yeah, I won't lie. The work that I did reading through the Gurmit indenture death records was horrific. But it also ignited, I suppose, a passion to do something about it. And it's that search for justice. It also, I think, for me, something that really inspires me is a quote that I heard Esther Perel say, actually. She's an amazing family counselor. She's based in New York. But anyway, I digress. But she says that freedom in captivity comes through the imagination. And, for me, it's through the imagination of my children sometimes, through the imagination of my family. And sometimes it's in the injustices of the world, imagining a better future for our children. And that really is, I think, what my driving force is, yes, the reality might be challenging now, but we can be part of a solution. And yeah, and there are some amazing good minds and good people out there, willing to take risks, willing to put their money where their mouth is and to do something beautiful with, like the skills and the resources that we have. So yeah, that's definitely part of my driver.
Brilliant. And you're doing something so important. You're doing something that's highly visible now. How do you balance home life and professional life?
What do you mean?
Yeah, with two kids and a husband and obviously yourself being a mom. What's the secret formula there?
I have a lot of support from my family and my friends. I'm sorry, you can probably hear my kids. They've just gotten home from school.
Right.
It's full and it's great. I love going for walks with a friend of mine most mornings, to get out in nature and to have that one-on-one time and to just reflect and prepare for the day. Yeah, I have regular date nights with my husband, just, something that's in the calendar that we can do together. My parents look after the kids. We have instigated like a whānau kai night every week or every fortnight at least with with my parents and my sister's family here, just so that we can keep in touch because we have such busy lives, So these are the things that I suppose ground me. I'm part of a church community, so my husband is a pastor here in Wellington, and that is again something that I find very grounding, space for reflection. And I draw inspiration from that. And I think definitely being a good neighbor, in all of those walks of life.
Wow,
Yeah,
that's
important.
beautiful and profound. Being a good neighbor, that it's not just a person living next to your house, but just being the amazing person God has created you to be with everyone, right? Now, Pritika, we've been chatting for a very long time, and I know the kids are here. We will have to draw this to a close. But any final words from you for our viewers?
Yeah, I suppose be a good Gurmit descendant. Be a good Gurmit descendant. What do I mean by that? We come from a people group who were exploited and, were trafficked to Fiji to work not far off from the status of slaves. And out of that, we have done very well overseas, but we still have brothers and sisters back home who struggle. We have a world that is largely not focused on equity, on lifting the vulnerable up. And so as a Gurmit descendant, what is our responsibility to make sure we always lift up the vulnerable too? I think that's for me is my sort of challenge and my daily battle, and sometimes it gets really overwhelming.
Mm.
And so again, the things that ground us and help us to make things sustainable is absolutely essential. But yeah, for me, I think my eye is always on, I'm okay maybe, but what about the other? And what can I do to make sure that no child grows up without a parent because they've died to a heart attack? That for me is my life's work probably. But there are many other things that I suppose break my heart that I think, all of us collectively could do many things to help.
Wow, that's so beautifully put. You have found your why, you have found your calling, you have found your purpose, and now you are running with it. And the message, I suppose, is the same for everyone, right? Discover your calling, your purpose, and operate in it, because then motivation's just inside it. It just happens because that's what you have been created to do. So. Thank you. And again, being from Fiji, that outward living is what we have grown up with. It's just so important and natural for us and
And we
fulfill.
wouldn't have survived without it either, like Aji, if she didn't help her neighbor, if she didn't love the people next to her, they wouldn't have all survived.
Yeah.
They needed each other to survive. And sometimes in an urban context where we become so autonomous and individualistic, we forget that. And actually coming back to that gathered body, as such,
That
is
community,
really
right?
important. Yeah.
Pritika, thank you so much for your time. We are truly honored. And to our viewers, thank you so much. I really hope you have enjoyed this conversation, that you have found something that's triggered in you, that's made you, if you haven't had a blood test yet or a general health check, to actually go step out and get it done. But at the same time, seeing the amazing work our people from Fiji are doing, even after moving out of Fiji, to still help the people of Fiji. So thank you once again for joining us. I really hope that you've enjoyed this episode. Please do like, share, and subscribe. And we'll see you in the next episode of the 3i Stories podcast, a better version of you.